Hello, my name is Hatem, and in this video, I would like to discuss with you a very good novel by Stephen King, and why I think this novel is the scariest book written by Stephen King. So first, let's have a brief introduction to Stephen King. Of course, all of you know Stephen King, but the purpose of this introduction is to make you understand why I think this is the most scary book by him. So Stephen King is well known as the king of horror. But I bit of disagree with this because I think Stephen King is the king of the supernatural. Most of his novels include supernatural elements. Whether these novels are horror or thriller or doesn't contain horror elements. So yes, Stephen King writes non-horror books. For example, The Green Mile. So The Green Mile doesn't have horror elements, but it has supernatural elements. And this applies to most of his books. They contain supernatural elements, except for clearly this one. This book can be considered a horror book, and I'll tell you why, but it doesn't have any supernatural elements at all. So what Misery is all about? So Misery is you can call it a straightforward story. It's not a complex story. There's only one storyline at a single time, not multiple storylines existing parallelly, then at the end of the novel, they intersect. This is one single storyline, and in a single place, okay? Usually it's the setting of the novel going on in almost one place. So there are not multiple places within the novel. Also characters. You don't have to memorize lots of characters' names because this novel, it includes only 2 characters. So this is not a complex story in terms of storytelling and storylines, and in terms of the number of characters, but still it has some complex character development elements. And this is the beauty of this book, actually. So what is the plot without any spoilers? So this book is about a famous writer. Usually the main character in Stephen King novels are writers like him. So a famous writer called Paul Sheldon. And at the beginning of the novel, Paul Sheldon makes an accident with his car in an almost remote place. And he has severe wounds. His legs are broken, crushed. His bones are crushed. But the good news is he is saved. And saved by a lady called Annie Wilkes. The good news. Another good news is that Annie works or used to work as a nurse. So she knows how to take care of such cases. And also the good news is Annie Wilkes is a fan of Paul Sheldon. And not a regular fan. She is considering herself as his #1 fan. So yeah, good news for Paul. But if this fan is a lunatic, an extreme fan, this will be something else. And this is what will happen. So Annie saves him, but instead of bringing him to a hospital, she takes Paul Sheldon into her home. And she started taking care of him. He was in a coma or something, and then he wakes up in her house, in his bed, finds how many wounds and the result of the accident. He realizes how he can't walk. He even thinks that he will never walk again. So yeah, and then Annie comes to him And now she knows, because she's got his documents and stuff, she knows that he's Paul Sheldon. She's very happy. She's giggling and she's very happy. I'm the luckiest woman on earth. My favorite writer now is, I'm taking care of him. And she tells Paul that she's the #1 fan. She's his #1 fan. And why is that? Because Paul Sheldon, and this is a very important theme here, Paul Sheldon is famous of a novel series called Misery. So hence the name of this book. So Misery is the name of a lady, the famous character in his series. And this brings some complications in the character development within this book, is that Paul Sheldon is not proud of this series. So he thinks that this series doesn't represent him as a creative writer, as a talented writer. Most of the audience of this series of books are ladies and women who are interested in romantic plot lines and so on. And he thinks that even though this series is commercially very successful, he doesn't think that this is, or this should be, the product of Paul Sheldon. And this is an important theme. So what happens is, the final novel in the series, he decided to let his main character, Misery, get killed and die at the end. And he was planning this to put an end to the series and then start new novels that represents what Paul Sheldon really is as a writer, as a creative writer. So the last installment or last book has been released while he was on the way making, and when he made this accident. And Annie has bought this book and she started reading it while she is taking care of Paul Sheldon, the injured Paul Sheldon. And she was very excited to reach the end of the book. She said that it's a very beautiful book. She was treating Paul very nicely until she reaches the end of the book and discovers that her favorite character ever is dead. So this moment when Annie enters the room to face Paul Sheldon, and this is a different Annie for Paul. Now he's starting to see the other dark side of Annie Wilkes. An angry and upset person, and she didn't believe that he killed her favorite character, Misery. And of course, this is not spoilers. This is just in the back cover, you'll find this. So she starts to force him to write another novel, to continue the series, to bring back Misery to life. Somehow, she doesn't care. Your responsibility as Paul, you are a criminal, you killed my Misery. How ironic. So you need to bring Misery back. So you need to continue the series of Misery. So, and here starts the complications and the inner struggle within Paul. Okay, so he is forced, and imagine this, if you put yourself in his place, as a creative job of creating characters and plots and novels, you are forced into a creative process that you don't think that you need to do this, or you don't think that this should be out to the world, out to this creative process. So he comes to a writer's block, and then he starts to write different versions of how to bring Misery to life, and Annie doesn't like it, and so on. So here starts the complications, and there's the issue of self-respect, that again, part of the inner struggle, that in order to survive, because Annie has is now a different person. And he starts to discover things, and she has history and stuff. So should he resist? But he's too weak to resist. And then she's giving him these medications and stuff to control him and control his pain. And actually, this book has the most comprehensive and disturbing explanations of pain. So the book describes how Paul feels pain, especially in his legs, which are crushed bones now. And he can't tolerate this pain, so she gives him medication so that he don't feel this pain, strong medications. And he starts to get addicted to these medications, and she starts to control him through this. Then, when things start to get complicated throughout the novel, she starts to torture him physically, and this has very disturbing scenes that you mean, oh, please, Annie, don't do this. So yeah, and this is why I think this novel is scary. Because again, I told you that I think that Stephen King is the king of supernatural. So usually when you read his supernatural horror books, like Pet Sematary, for example, or The Shining, so they include horror elements, yes, well-crafted horror elements, but based on supernatural phenomena. And you feel that in your inner self that, yeah, this can't happen anyway. I mean, it's supernatural elements from the imagination of the writer, from Stephen King. But Misery, it doesn't have any supernatural elements. It's a man trapped in a remote area, in a house in a remote area, with a lunatic. So she is not psychologically or mentally stable at all. She is ready, easily, without any remorse, to do anything to him, just to make him write the book she is expecting. And he's trapped with her, with no communication at the outside world at all. And this is very scary. And this can happen in real life. So there are no supernatural elements here. Everything here is not out of the ordinary. I mean, it can happen. So, and this is what's scary when you're going on through this book and trying to figure out what Annie can do next, and how unpredictable her character is, how unstable her character is. This is what makes this book, I think, one or the scariest book ever written by Stephen King. And it's not a large book. So usually Stephen King has bulky novels. So this is around 350 pages or so. So it's not a large book. But what happens here, I mean, it's very disturbing and scary. And yeah, again, why it's scary? It doesn't have any supernatural elements. It can happen. So, and what I like here, and why Stephen King is very talented. So the character development part. So how Annie and Paul started at the beginning of that plot, and how they have changed, and the relationship and the dynamics between them have changed throughout the book until what happens in the end. I mean, Stephen King, so to being able to write all this and only two characters, one single storyline at a time, in one place only, and keep you attached to what happens here, and you would like to know what happens next. Paul, you are feeling feeling what Paul feels, the pain, the inner struggle. You sympathize with Paul, you'd like to help him. Please take care, Paul. Take care. And Annie. So I think my personal opinion is Annie Wilkes is the greatest ever villain ever written in novels. Annie, I mean, you will hate her throughout this book. You will hate Annie, and this means that this is a successfully written character, Annie Wilkes. You will never forget her after the end of the book. Yeah, so that was it about Misery. I strongly recommend reading this book. It's not a long read. So if you like thrillers, horror elements in a book, very well written character development, yeah, this book is for you. If you don't mind very disturbing scenes and elements, some gore and stuff, but this is a very good book that I strongly recommend, and I promise you, you will hate Annie Wilkes. So yeah, so this is the reason I think this is the scariest Stephen King book. So yeah, I hope you liked this video. Thank you for watching, and see you in next videos. Bye.